Hello, good morning. How is everyone doing today? All right. If you're here, say hello in the chat. Tell me how you're doing. Morning, Jacqueline. Hey, Gunica. Hey, Marissa. Hi, Alicia. Oh man, still got the morning little bit of gunk in my throat. How's everyone doing this morning? I had a bit of a weird morning. Marissa doing good. Jacqueline feeling great. Energized, awesome. Gunica, glad to hear you're doing well. Hey, Miss Garcia. Oh, you got your car back from the shop. That's awesome. I had sort of a weird morning. I got a new coffee maker that I did not set up correctly. That's all right. That's just what happens. You gotta learn. And then I came to sit down and do my YouTube live, and my computer decided that it was time to force restart. So I was a couple minutes late today. Oh man, Miss Garcia, that's awesome. It's always nice when your car repairs come in less than you think that they're going to. Definitely super stressful when they come in more than you think they're going to. I've had both things happen, so that's awesome. So yeah, I sat down to get on YouTube Live, and my computer was like, no, not today. So I'll wait. And I waited a few minutes, and now it's ready to go. So that's good. Win some, lose some, I guess. All right. Morning, Cindy. Hey, Mom. It is so every once in a while it just decides it's time to restart, which is fine, right? You got to restart your computer. Goodness knows I don't do it on my own as often as I should. And at least this time, this one didn't take very long. Often when my computer restarts, it takes, I don't know, like 20 minutes for it to finish restarting. And it usually does that in the absolute worst times. Today it took maybe only 2 minutes. So that was good. The only really annoying part of it for today is that, even though it started up again, when it restarts, it often goes a little slow at the beginning. Just like all of us, right? Upon waking up, we're not always at our fastest. We're not at top capacity. Evidently neither is my computer, and that's all right. I usually try to have all of my stuff ready to just paste the link in and get started, but because of the um, restart, I'm not. So I'm just trying to get all of my announcements set up in Canvas to post the link. Um, do we have any AP tests today? Yes, I would always like to just delay the update, but the problem is I would just keep delaying it forever. I'm not good about those things. If I can delay it, I will. That's probably why it has to sort of just go into emergency restart mode, is because I have put it off for too long. So is anyone taking AP tests today? It looks like we have Spanish literature and chemistry. I don't know that we even offer Spanish literature. But chemistry, I know we have, maybe? I don't know. All right, let's see. Yeah, the updates are all a little annoying, but if I were better about it, and someday I might do this, I would like to be the kind of person who just shuts down my computer every day. But at least up until this point in my many years of computer usage, that has not been a habit that I've ever gotten into. Um, so it is what it is. This way was much better than it turning off for 20 minutes and working on update after update after update. If I just follow the directions of every friend that I have in IT and just turned it off every day, I would be fine. But I never feel like I'm finishing things. And so I sort of leave a bunch of stuff open for me to finish the next day, and then never really finish anything anyway. So it is what it is. It's fine. I know, right, Miss Garcia? And I know that there are people who do it. There are people who just turn off their computer, and I'm impressed by it. I have a feeling those people are maybe better at finishing tasks, or better at remembering all of the tasks that will need to be finished. And honestly, I'm pretty organized. I bet if I came up with a system, I would be able to make something work so that at the end of the day, I close out all of the things that I need. I did find this extension called Toby. I know there's one called OneTab, and all of that can sort of let you save all of the tabs that you have open, so you could pick up right where you left off. But I don't know. It's just not a habit, I think. I think I know that I could do it. I would know how to do it, and I just don't. Hey, Mrs. Savage. All right. So with all that long stuff, oh, the school policy on your personal Chromebook won't let you restore tabs. Weird. That's super annoying. Yeah, that's super weird. I suppose I don't ever use a personal computer at school. I only ever use my school issued computer. So that might be part of it. I also just don't have a cool setup like you do, Miss Savage. I don't have a cool setup at home either. I sort of would really like a second monitor here, but it is what it is. Weird. Yeah, that's crazy. Okay, so I'm gonna go into our poem. I realized that was a long intro. Oh, connect to your TV. See, I don't have a TV in here. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and do the poem because we've been here for a while and I started late and I'm gonna get going. So this is a poem called Casabianca by Elizabeth Bishop. Um, okay. Loves the boy stood on the burning deck, trying to recite the boy stood on the burning deck. Loves the sun stood stammering elocution, while the poor ship in flames went down. Loves the obstinate boy, the ship, even the swimming sailors, who would like a schoolroom platform too, or an excuse to stay on deck, and loves the burning boy. So there it is. Um, yeah, I haven't spent a ton of time with that poem. I haven't spent a lot of time um, sort of working through those metaphors about love being something, love being the boy that did this, love being the whatever. And I just think it's really interesting. So yeah, there you go. That was the poem. Oh, Jacqueline, I remember you talking about using your TV for martial arts classes. That's awesome. Yeah, if the audio doesn't connect though, that would be a challenge. But that's a cool setup. Yeah, Alicia, I haven't spent any time trying to make the connection, but I was just struck by that over again and the way that it turned. Um, that love is the boy that stood on the burning deck, love is the boy, the ship, the swimming sailors, and loves the burning boy. So that it's not just it's the boy who stood on the burning deck, but there's the burning boy. I don't know. I just think that the language there is really interesting. Um, yeah, I think like a ship going down. I would be really interested to spend more time with that poem and really um, work through it and get get into it. There's a lot in there. It's a short poem, two stanzas, um, but I think there's a lot of really a lot of depth to the language that's being used there, um, and it just stood out to me as being interesting. Yeah, exactly. Open to lots of interpretation. Yes. It hooks you in and it sort of traps you there, right? You get tangled up in the wording, so you almost have to spend more time with it, which I think is interesting. Okay, we are going to now talk about a book that is one of my favorites. Um, this is another Jane Austen book, and I know I've recommended a couple before. Um, when I was in college, I took a class called Jane Austen Novel and Film, and we read every Jane Austen book that has been published and watched and compared them to film versions. Um, I think for every book, so there are 6 full novels that Jane Austen wrote. Um, I think we watched 2 film adaptations for every book. And it was just a fascinating class to really delve into Jane Austen's works, and also get a better understanding of how filmmakers take text and turn it into film. Oh, it's so fun to watch you guys be talking about it in the chat, trying to understand that poem. Yeah, I think there's a lot of really interesting, ways that we could take it. I think one of the things I sort of also picked up on there is, parental love, um, and so I think that love is so complex, that might be part of what we're seeing in that poem there. Um, but so the poem or the book I'm gonna share today, um, was the book that stood out during that class as my favorite, and it is Persuasion by Jane Austen. So I've read every novel of Jane Austen's. Pride and Prejudice is probably the most famous one. I've read that book a couple of times. Um, Sense and Sensibility is the other one that I've recommended here. Um, but Persuasion stood out to me as being the one that I just loved. It was so fun and interesting and cool, um, and so outside of its time. Yeah, Miss Savage, I really like that interpretation, right? That love's not always pretty and fluffy. There's different dimensions, and this poem gets to that. So that's fun. Oh my gosh, Gunica, I think some of it comes down to, and I knew that you were reading it at one point. Um, I think some of it comes down to the language is a little bit challenging. Um, Certainly, the beginning of this book starts weird. Um, and some of it might be a maturity thing, right? Like I've had a couple of times in my life I started reading a book when I was too young. I wasn't ready for it and I wasn't able to finish. So like my mom gave me To Kill a Mockingbird when I was like in the 5th grade and I made it through like 8 pages and I was like, I don't get it, I don't like it, I'm out. And I stopped reading it. And I read it again in the 10th grade and it became one of like my all-time favorite books. So I think some of it might just be the challenge of having the right timing. Um, and maybe some of it's just having more time to dig into it. So maybe if I talk it out, it'll be more fun. I don't know. So I'll tell you a little bit about the book and then I'll tell you why I love it and then we'll read some. Okay, so Anne Elliot lives at Kellyanch Hall with her 2 sisters and vain father, Sir Walter. When financial struggles begin to affect the Elliot family, they decide to move to Bath. Anne decides to visit before the move and runs into many old friends. Most surprisingly, she is reunited with Frederick Wentworth, a past fiance who, under advice from her father and friend Lady Russell, never married. Wentworth's lack of wealth and rank in the community were their main concerns, and therefore, 8 years later, Anne is still unmarried with little romantic prospects. However, through her journey and move, Anne may find that she has been looking for was right in front of her the whole time. Ooh, it's so exciting. So the deal here is Anne Elliot is 28 during this story. Oh, yes. Mrs. Savage, I know that I have not seen that video, but I do know that there's some really interesting stuff about why To Kill a Mockingbird is so popular from that like publishing marketing standpoint. From a literary standpoint, man, just ask Mr. Shapsis. It is not the best book ever written. But yeah, if you're interested in learning more about that, you can look it up in Vox. So the deal is Anne Elliot is 28 when this novel takes place. And in the time that this was written, that was essentially, she would have been considered a spinster, right? There was no point in trying to introduce her to new men at this point. There's no point trying to get her married. Her, the societal expectations of women to get married and go off and have children and whatever, she had already sort of failed right, within those societal expectations. Um, she had been engaged to Frederick Wentworth, um, but her father and this like family friend, Lady Russell, had decided that he was not suitable. He was not wealthy enough. He didn't have any social standing, and it wasn't worth her time to get sort of caught up with a man like that. And the father is incredibly vain, meaning like self centered. He really only cares about his own wealth and the wealth of others and status and money and pushes that upon other people. In fact, like the whole first chapter is him like going through this book of um, who is related to who and who's in good families and blah 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 blah. And so the story almost starts out with some irony. This man who is so obsessed with wealth and good social standing is so broke that he has to move to somewhere less expensive, essentially. Um, and so they spend all this time moving from their house to Bath, which is like a beach town in England. And Anne Elliot has two sisters, one of whom is sort of silly and immature and young, and she gets to spend all this time with her ex-fiance and her sister's husband and her younger sister who's unmarried, and it's all sort of wacky. um, but she sort of has all this time with this man that she once loved, um, and want to try to come back together. So um, it's a really interesting love story that has all of this social context, which that might be part of what's challenging to get through. Um, but I think when you get to the end, you get to the payoff, it's totally worth it. Yeah, I mean, so Mrs. Savage, not quite the beach. I don't know, does England really have anything that is quite the beach? I wouldn't know. I've never been. But either way, it's like their version of the beach, from what I understand. At least then, it was closer to a beach. Maybe? Who knows? Coastal? Southern England has beaches. Sure, sure, sure. Whatever. There's a whole thing where they're on the beach and there's a ledge. I'm not going to spoil it. That might not be when they're in Bath. That might be when they go somewhere else. I don't remember. It's been a long time since I read this book. Okay, guys. I don't remember all of the locales in all these books. So I want to read a little bit of this book. I don't want to read the first chapter because, like I said, pretty much the whole first chapter is the father going through a book of like people with status and money and blah 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 blah. Oh, Mom, that might be what I'm thinking of. Bath is a town with natural springs. People go there for the waters. There you go. Okay, sure, sure, sure. So I'm going to read a little bit from chapter 2, which is where a lot of the story part begins. So essentially what has happened is Mr. Shepherd, a lawyer, has come into town to sort of help Sir Walter deal with his financial situation, and their family friend, Lady Russell, has come in. So Lady Russell was most anxiously zealous on the subject and gave it much serious consideration. She was a woman rather of sound than of quick abilities, whose difficulties in coming to any decision in this instance were great, from the opposition of two leading principles. She was of strict integrity herself, with a delicate sense of honor. But she was as desirous of saving Sir Walter's feelings, as solicitous for the credit of the family, as aristocratic in her ideas of what was due to them, as anybody the sense of honesty could well be. She was a benevolent, charitable, good woman, and capable of strong attachments, most correct in her conduct, strict in her notions of decorum, and with manners that were held a standard of good breeding. She had a cultivated mind and was, generally speaking, rational and consistent. But she had prejudices on the side of ancestry. She had a value for rank and consequence which blinded her a little to the faults of those who possessed them. Herself, the widow of only a knight, she gave the dignity of a baronet all its due. And Sir Walter, independent of his claims as an old acquaintance, an attentive neighbor, an obliging landlord, the husband of her very dear friend, the father of Anne and her sisters, was, as being Sir Walter in her apprehension, entitled to a great deal of compassion and consideration under his present difficulties. They must retrench. That did not admit of a doubt. But she was very anxious to have it done with the least possible pain to him and Elizabeth. She drew up plans of economy. She made exact calculations. And she did what nobody else thought of doing. She consulted Anne, who never seemed considered by others as having any interest in the question. She consulted and in a degree was influenced by her marking out the scheme of retrenchment, which was at last submitted to Sir Walter. Every emendation of Anne's was on the side of honesty against importance. She wanted more vigorous measures, a more complete reformation, a quicker release from debt, a much higher tone of indifference for everything but injustice and equity. If we can persuade your father to all this, said Lady Russell, looking over her paper, much may be done. If he will adopt these regulations, in 7 years he will be clear. And I hope we may be able to convince him and Elizabeth that Kellynch Hall has a respectability in itself which cannot be affected by these reductions, and that the true dignity of Sir Walter Elliot will be very far from learned in the eyes of sensible people, by acting like a man of principle. What he will be doing, in fact, but what very many of our first families have done or ought to do. There will be nothing singular in his case, and it is singularity which often makes the worst part of our suffering, as it always does of our conduct. I have great hope of prevailing. We must be serious and decided, for after all, the person who has contracted debts must pay them. And though a great deal is due to the feelings of the gentleman and the head of the house, like your father, there is still more due to the character of an honest man. This was the principle on which Anne wanted her father to be proceeding, his friends to be urging him. She considered it as an act of indispensable duty to clear away the claims of creditors and all the expedition that the most comprehensive retrenchments could secure, and saw no dignity in anything short of it. She wanted it to be prescribed and felt as a duty. She rated Lady Russell's influence highly, and as to the severe degree of self-denial which her own conscience prompted, she believed that there may be little more difficulty in persuading them to a complete than half a reformation. Her knowledge of her father and Elizabeth inclined her to think that the sacrifice of one pair of horses would be hardly less painful than of both, and so on, through the whole list of Lady Russell's too gentle reductions. So, there you go. So one of the things that is interesting there is we have Lady Russell, who's trying to help Sir Walter get out of this financial trouble. And with her description there, she is really interested in people being statist and being wealthy. And so she knows that Sir Walter is still statist. He still comes from a good family. He has a title, right, sir. but he is no longer really wealthy, and she's encouraging him to not get out of debt as quickly as he could so that he can still have an idea or a feeling of his old lifestyle, which was living above his means. And Anne is much more interested in being out of debt, right? Fixing what is broken and moving on. Really taking some serious steps to get out of debt quickly. But that's not the path that they're taking. So through all this, she's going to start spending more time with her ex-fiance, who has had a whole life in these 8 years that they've been apart and has actually accrued some wealth for himself over that time. Can't really change the kind of family he came from, but he has a well-regarded position and he has wealth. And their story of sort of how they get back to each other is interesting. So I really recommend it. Kunika, I know that you said that you had trouble getting through it. It might be helpful to like read a summary of it before you get in. I don't think I read any Jane Austen until college. Can that be right? That might be right. I maybe read Sense and Sensibility or Pride and Prejudice in high school. But a lot of it is social commentary, I think especially in Persuasion. So reading a summary or an analysis of the book to sort of understand that social situation first might be helpful. You read Pride and Prejudice before this. Oh, the beginning was too slow. Yeah, I think if you can push through, there's the really fun ledge jumping scene, and the card game at the end is just so fun. I don't want to spoil anything, but I don't know how far you made it through. If you can make it through, it really does speed up. It gets really fun. Again, I've read all of Jane Austen's books, and I think I like Persuasion the best just because I like Anne Elliot the best. She is just so practical and pragmatic and fun. She's just fun and interesting. And I like the whole idea that this woman who is supposed to be like too old, she's over the hill, she's not worth anything anymore, proves so much to be worth more than all those people with their status and their money and blah 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 blah. Oh man, if you got to the ledge, you got to get through the ledge. I don't want to spoil it for everybody, but the ledge aftermath, I think, is where it starts to get really good. The other thing you might try is listening to it on audiobook. I find for books that I think are challenging or that I think are too slow, I like to read them on paper first just to be able to keep the characters straight. But then I can go into listening to them on audiobook because you can speed it up and you can sort of like force your way through it without having to like sit down and be focused on it completely. You can listen while doing something else. So just a thought. Okay, we're way over time. We are way over time, and I gotta get on to grading these final essays and final projects. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I'm just talkative today, I guess. Persuasion, all of Jane Austen's books are in the public domain. So you can find them super easily in both ebook and audiobook for free. So there you go. Okay, I'm for real gonna go because we got stuff to do. We got stuff to grade. You got AP tests to study for or something. I don't know. Um, but I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Um, and I will see you back here again tomorrow. Um, or honors students will still have our normal Google Meet today. Seniors, we're taking today and tomorrow off of Google Meet, so I will see you back here tomorrow. All right. Always remember who you are, what you represent, and to show your Mustang pride. Bye, guys.